Have you ever stopped to really think about how a plant stands up? I mean, a delicate flower stem or even a huge tree reaching way up high.
Hmm.
What's holding them up? And maybe more importantly, what's going on inside to keep them alive? Today, we're doing a deep dive into that hidden world inside plant stems. We're using Brian Capon's excellent book, Botany for Gardeners, as our guide. Our goal is to unpack the amazing engineering that lets plants grow and thrive and figure out how knowing this stuff can actually help you in your own garden.
Exactly. And it's not just about naming parts, is it? It's about understanding the why. Connecting what you see, a new leaf, a tree swaying to the cellular stuff happening inside. And don't worry about pictures. We'll paint a picture with words. We'll describe everything so you can visualize it.
Okay, let's get into it then. When I picture a stem, I often think of something soft, green, like a young sunflower stem maybe,
Yeah.
or a bean plant. What's happening inside those herbaceous stems?
Right, those softer stems. That's mostly the result of what we call primary growth. And inside, even though they seem simple, they're quite organized, usually into about 6 distinct areas. So right on the very outside, you've got the epidermis. It's a single layer of cells. Think of it like the stem skin. The name even comes from Greek epi means upon, and derma means skin.
Okay, so like skin, does it have special features, like waterproofing or protection?
It absolutely does. Covering those epidermal cells and even sort of soaking into their outer walls is a waxy layer called the cuticle, made of a substance called cutin, its main job, to cut down on water loss through evaporation. It's like a natural sealant. And it also helps keep out things like molds and other unwanted guests.
That makes sense.
And this is where it gets interesting for anyone touching plants. The cuticle isn't always the same. Some stems are super smooth. Others might look kind of bluish gray, dusty almost. That's called glaucous. It's extra wax. Or they could be pubescent, which just means hairy.
Hairy stems.
Yeah, fuzzy. So next time you touch a stem, feel it. Is it smooth, waxy, fuzzy? Those little hairs aren't just for show. They can actually put off small insects. Some even ooze sticky stuff to trap them.
Huh. So the texture tells you something about its defenses.
Exactly. It's like feeling its built-in pest control system.
Cool. So, okay, past the epidermis, the skin, what's next?
Just inside that layer, you find the cortex. It's usually several cell layers thick, and these cells often have chloroplasts, which is why those young stems are usually green. They're actually doing photosynthesis right there.
Oh, okay.
Then right in the middle, the very center, is the pith. It's a large area, and the cells look pretty similar to the cortex cells, often used for storage, like starch. If you want a visual, think about cutting a cucumber open. You know the green rind part? That's kind of like the cortex.
Yeah.
And the soft, watery middle bit, that's the pith.
That cucumber analogy really works.
Yeah.
Cortex, pith. But how does stuff move around? Water,
Yeah.
food? There must be pipes, right?
Absolutely. That's where the vascular bundles come in. They're usually tucked between the pith and the cortex, and they really stand out. Vascular comes from vasculum, Latin for little vessel. And that's exactly what they are. The plant's pipelines.
Pipelines.
Each bundle has 2 main types of tissue. Towards the inside of the bundle, you have xylem. These are generally larger cells, and their job is conducting water and minerals up from the roots. Think of them as the wider pipes in the system.
Bringing water up, got it.
Then, on the outer side of the same bundle, you have phloem. These cells are usually smaller. They carry the sugars the food made in the leaves during photosynthesis down to where the plant needs it. Roots, fruits, new growth.
So water up through xylem, food down through phloem in the
Yeah.
same bundle.
Right next to each other. And these bundles create this amazing continuous network connecting leaves, stems, and roots. It's all linked.
So, okay, when my basil plant looks all floppy and sad on a hot day,
Uh-huh.
I'm actually seeing those xylem pipes struggling. It's not just general thirst, it's a specific plumbing issue inside.
You've got it. That's exactly right. Seeing it that way helps you figure out what's wrong. Is it just not enough water in the soil, or is something else blocking that transport?
Right. And you mentioned these are all primary tissues. What does that mean?
Good question. Primary tissues means they were formed during primary growth. That's the growth that makes the plant taller, elongates it. It all starts at the very tip, the apical meristem. That's the growth zone. Now, connecting the primary xylem and phloem within those bundles, there's often a single row of special cells. The vascular cambium, it's a type of meristem too, meaning it can divide, but it divides sideways, laterally. Yeah, increasing the stem's width. And in some plants, this ability is the key to a massive transformation. It sets the stage for getting thicker, for becoming woody.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. Because a huge oak tree starts as a tiny seedling, looking pretty much like that herbaceous stem we just talked about. How does it go from that soft green thing to a massive solid trunk? What's the big change?
That big change is secondary growth. It's all about thickening the stem, and it relies on two special layers of dividing cells, two lateral meristems, the vascular cambium we just mentioned, and another one called the cork cambium.
Okay, let's break that down.
Re-
Vascular cambium first. You said it divides.
Right. Picture its location. It's basically the dividing line between what will become wood and what will become bark. When its cells divide, they can go in three directions. Let's focus on two first. When they divide inward, towards the center of the stem, the new cells mature into secondary xylem. These cells develop really thick walls strengthened with lignin. Then the living part, the protoplasm, dies. What's left are these incredibly strong, hollow, dead cells. Millions of them stacked together. And that is wood.
Wow. So the wood we use for building for furniture is essentially a mass of dead, super strong water pipes.
That's a great way to put it. It's the tree's structural support and its main water transport system, even though the cells are dead. Now, when the vascular cambium divides outward, away from the center, it forms secondary phloem. This becomes the inner part of the bark. Many of these phloem cells stay alive, continuing to transport food. Others develop thick walls for support.
Okay, wood inside, inner bark outside. What about the third direction?
Yes. Some cambium cells also divide sideways. This just adds more cells to the cambium layer itself. Why? Because as the stem gets wider, the cambium ring needs to get bigger too, right? It has to expand its own circumference. And here's a key thing. The vascular cambium almost always divides more often inward than outward. Meaning you always end up with much more wood, secondary xylem, than you do inner bark, secondary phloem. That's why tree trunks are mostly wood.
That makes sense. Okay, so that's the wood in the inner bark sorted. What about the outer bark, the really tough protective layer we actually see and feel?
That's where the second lateral meristem comes in, the cork cambium. Its job is to produce cork. This cork tissue becomes the outer layer of the bark, replacing that original epidermis, which gets stretched and broken as the stem thickens. Cork is usually several cell layers thick, formed by the cork cambium dividing outwards. As the tree grows, the outermost cork layers dry out, crack, sometimes peel off. Think of birch or sycamore bark.
Yeah.
But new cork is always being made from the inside by the cork cambium, so the protective layer is maintained. And that visible texture, the deep ridges on an oak, the smoothness of a beech, that's all down to the cork and how it grows and ages.
It's amazing. And you mentioned cork before, like for wine bottles.
Exactly. That cork comes from the cork oak tree. It's harvested sustainably, and its properties are perfect. It's lightweight, compressible, elastic, and it's naturally waterproofed with a substance called suberin. That waterproofing is great for the tree, and it's great for keeping wine from leaking or evaporating. Plus, it's slightly porous to gases, which helps wine age properly. Plant biology in your wine bottle.
Huh. That is a great connection. So all these layers, wood, cambium, phloem, cork cambium, cork, they make up the trunk. What about branches? How do they fit in?
It's all about continuity. The xylem, the phloem, both cambiums, the cork, they are all continuous between the trunk and any branches growing out of it. Think about it. As the trunk adds new layers of wood each year, the base of a growing branch gets progressively buried deeper and deeper within that wood.
Buried.
Yeah, surrounded by new trunk tissue, which is why when you cut lumber, you see those oval shapes knots.
Knots or buried branches.
Exactly. You're seeing a cross-section of where a branch originated deep inside the trunk years ago, and this continuity is also the absolute key to grafting.
Right, you mentioned that, like putting one type of apple onto another tree.
Precisely. Grafting involves joining a scion, that's the piece you want to grow, maybe a branch or bud, onto a stalk, which is the rooted part. For it to work, you have to line up the vascular tissues, especially the vascular cambium of the scion in the stalk, really carefully. If you do that, they fuse. The xylem connects, the phloem connects, and water and food can flow between them. The graft takes.
And if you don't line them up?
It fails. No connection, no life support. That's also why grafting usually only works between closely related plants. Their tissues are compatible. Try to graft an apple onto an oak. The tissues will likely reject each other, like an incompatible organ transplant.
Fascinating. It really highlights how integrated that whole system is. So, okay, let's imagine we have a cross-section of a trunk, maybe a stump. We see the wood. What other stories are hidden there?
Oh, a stump is like reading a book of the tree's life. You'll usually see two distinct zones within the wood, the secondary xylem. The outer part, usually lighter in color and closer to the bark, and the vascular cambium is the sapwood. This is the functional, living part of the wood. Well, the cells themselves are dead, but this is where the water, the sap, is actively flowing up the tree. It's the act of plumbing.
Okay, sapwood is the working part.
Then, towards the center, you often see a darker area. That's the heartwood. The cells here are older xylem that are no longer conducting water efficiently. They've become plugged up with various chemical compounds, resins, tannins, gums, and cellular debris.
Plugged up like waste disposal.
Sort of, yeah. It's where the tree dumps metabolic byproducts. But this isn't just waste, it serves vital functions. It provides immense structural strength to the core of the tree. And those chemicals often make the heartwood very resistant to decay and insects.
Ah, so that's why heartwood is often preferred for things like fence posts or outdoor furniture, because it resists rot.
Exactly. Those chemicals act like natural preservatives. It's also why a tree can actually survive, even if its heartwood completely rots away or gets burned out in a fire, as long as the sapwood ring is intact to carry water.
Incredible. So the tree can live without its core as long as the outer pipes work? What about those faint lines you sometimes see radiating out from the center, like spokes?
Good eye. Those are vascular rays. They're like horizontal pipelines made of living cells crossing the vertical grain of the wood. Their job includes moving waste products from the living phloem inwards to be deposited in the heartwood. They also store some food reserves, but structurally they can be lines of weakness. If you dry lumber too quickly or unevenly, it often splits along these rays.
Okay, makes sense. But the most obvious feature on many stumps are those circles, right? The rings.
Ah, yes, the annual rings, probably the most famous feature. They're called annual because in many places, each ring usually represents 1 year of growth.
It still blows my mind that you can basically count the years of a tree's life like that. How does that actually happen? Why does it form a distinct ring each year?
It's tied to the seasons, primarily in temperate climates where you have warm growing seasons and cold dormant seasons. The vascular cambium, remember, is responsible for making the wood. In fall and winter, when it's cold and maybe dry, the cambium becomes dormant. It stops dividing.
Okay, it takes a break.
Then in spring, when conditions improve, more water, warmer temperatures, new leaves needing resources, the cambium wakes up and starts dividing rapidly again. The xylem cells it produces in the spring, springwood or early wood, are usually very large in diameter.
That makes sense, right?
Lots of water needed for new growth.
Bigger pipes for peak demand.
Exactly. But as summer progresses, maybe water becomes a bit scarcer, growth slows down, the cells produced by the cambium tend to get progressively smaller and have thicker walls. This is the summerwood or late wood, so you get this visual contrast between the large cells of last spring and the smaller, denser cells of the late summerly fall. Then dormancy hits again. That boundary between the small latewood cells of 1 year and the large springwood cells of the next year is what forms the distinct line we see as an annual ring.
Wow, so each ring is basically a spring rush followed by a summer slowdown.
Pretty much. And the width of each ring tells a story, too. A wide ring means a good growing year, plenty of rain, favorable temperatures. A narrow ring, that usually indicates a tough year, maybe a drought, extreme cold, insect infestation, something that limited growth.
So trees are like living climate records.
They absolutely are. Scientists, dendrochronologists, study these ring patterns. They can reconstruct past climate conditions, date archaeological sites by matching wood patterns. Think about ancient trees like bristlecone pines, some over 5,000 years old, or giant sequoias. They hold millennia of climate history in their wood. It's helped us understand everything from ancient droughts that may have affected civilizations to long-term rainfall patterns.
That's just incredible. Truly live in libraries. Does this ring thing happen everywhere? What about tropical trees? No cold winters there.
That's a key difference. In many tropical regions with consistent warmth and rainfall year-round, the vascular cambium doesn't have that distinct start-stop cycle. It can be continuously active. As a result, many tropical trees don't form distinct annual rings. Botanists can't easily determine their exact age just by looking at a cross-section.
So they can still be ancient, we just can't count the years as easily.
Precisely. We know many are centuries old based on size and other factors, but the clear annual record isn't always there.
Okay, we spent a lot of time on these woody dicots like oaks and maples. But what about other plants? You mentioned palms, corn, bamboo. They stand tall too, but differently. What's their secret?
Right, let's switch gears to the monocots. This is a whole different group of flowering plants. Think grasses, lilies, orchids, palms, corn, bamboo. Structurally, their stems are fundamentally different from the dicots we've been discussing. Remember the vascular bundles in dicots, often arranged in a neat ring?
Yeah.
Well, in most monocot stems, those vascular bundles are just scattered, dozens, sometimes hundreds of them, and dispersed throughout the stem tissue. Because of this scattered arrangement, there isn't that clear distinction between a cortex and a pith that you see in dicots. It's more uniform inside.
Scattered bundles. Okay, that's different. What else?
The really big difference is this. Most monocots lack a vascular cambium and a cork cambium.
No cambium. So,
No secondary growth, no thickening by adding layers of wood and bark year after year. They don't produce true wood or bark in the way dicots do.
wait, then how does a palm tree get so big and tall? Or bamboo?
Good question. Palms achieve their thickness mostly during their primary growth phase, establishing that wide pattern of scattered vascular bundles early on. They don't keep adding layers outwards like a dicot. Their outer stem surface becomes hard and protective, almost like a crust, as the outer cells compress and dry. But it's not technically cork produced by a cork cambium.
So it's more like establishing their width from the start rather than adding girth over time.
Generally speaking, yes. And think about the advantages. We mentioned palms being flexible in storms.
Right, because they don't have that rigid woody core.
Exactly. That lack of rigid wood, which might seem like a weakness, is actually a brilliant adaptation for surviving high winds. They bend, they don't snap as easily.
Clever. What about things like bamboo or grasses? Many of them are hollow, aren't they?
They are, and that's another marvel of engineering. Think about a tall grass or a bamboo culm. It's mostly hollow inside. How does it stay strong? Well, their vascular bundles and the surrounding tissues are reinforced with lots of fibers. These are long, narrow cells with very thick walls, providing great tensile strength. And crucially, if you look inside a hollow stem like bamboo, you see those periodic cross walls or plates. Those are the nodes.
Yeah, the joints.
Those nodes act like internal braces.
Yeah.
They prevent the hollow tube from buckling or kinking under stress. It's an incredibly efficient design. Think about a wheat stem. It can have a length to diameter ratio of like 500.1. Super slender, yet it holds the heavy seed head way up high.
That is efficient. Less material needed, less energy spent compared to making solid wood.
Precisely. They achieve heightened support for their leaves and reproductive structures without the massive investment in wood formation that trees make. Lightweight strength. And speaking of efficiency, bamboo holds the record for fastest growing plant, right?
You mentioned that, like 47 inches in a day?
Some species, yes. Over 3 feet in 24 hours. It's astonishing growth. And many have that strange life cycle where they grow for decades, then flower all at once, everywhere, and then die. Still a bit of a mystery, that synchronous flowering.
Wow. Plants are just endlessly
They
fascinating.
really are. So if we zoom out again, from the microscopic plumbing in a soft green stem, to the historical record in tree rings, to the flexible, hollow strength of bamboo, plant stems are just incredible examples of organization, adaptation, and brilliant engineering.
So wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway for, someone listening, maybe someone who gardens or is just curious about plants?
I think the main thing is realizing that what you see on the outside is driven by this incredibly complex, organized world on the inside, understanding how water moves in xylem, how food travels in phloem, how stems get thicker, how they defend themselves. It changes how you look at plants.
Right. It's not just academic. Knowing this stuff actually makes you a better gardener, doesn't it? Like knowing why pruning a certain way works, or how water stress affects the plant internally, or why that particular wood is good for building. It connects the science to the practice.
Exactly. It deepens both your scientific appreciation and your practical skills. Every plant becomes this amazing little case study in biology and engineering.
So here's a final thought for you. Next time you're out and about, really look at a plant stem, any stem, a massive tree trunk, a blade of grass, a vine climbing a wall. Think about that unseen world inside the constant transport, the growth, the adaptation, all that incredible engineering reaching for the sun. What other things in nature, things we see every day, are hiding such complex and fascinating stories inside?
It's a great question. And this dive into stems is really just scratching the surface of botany. There's so much more. So keep exploring, keep asking questions. Let that curiosity lead you. The plant kingdom is full of wonders.